Ladies and gentlemen, on tonight's Air Raid Hour, we go through our favorite show of the year, our No Matter What show, where we go position by position and break down what players at each position in this upcoming NFL draft class are on our No Matter What list in honor of the classically terrible, but still have to watch it every year movie Draft Day. You'll notice Judge is not with me tonight, but he will be joining us in spirit. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in everyone to the Air Raid Hour penultimate show before our official draft coverage starts on Thursday night. And you'll notice Judge is not with me tonight, but he will be with us as part of the show tonight as we reveal our No Matter What list by position. Judge has pre-recorded some videos that we're going to share with you tonight for his No Matter What prospects at certain positions. And it is a fun show for us. I've already seen some comment sections coming in with RJ, Xavier Worthy, no matter what. Bills are electric, no matter what. Take Roman Wilson if you can. And I know Aaron Quinn would be a huge fan of that pick. Josh Hurdle draft Brian Thomas Jr. We know Thomas DeLaus of Cover 1B would be a huge fan of that pick. Sword Brothers Yosef, Xavier Leggett, an interesting name. Will he pop up on tonight's show at all? And Bills are electric coming in with another name, no matter what. Take Jerzon Johnny Newton if he falls to 28. And we'll get into all of that and more. But the first thing I do have to remind everyone, our coverage, yes, we have the show tonight, but we are going to be bringing you live coverage throughout the draft. Cover One will have you covered. I'm bringing up the graphic right here. Round 1, Thursday night. Judge and I will be hosting Thursday night coverage starting at 8 p.m. Anthony Prohaska will be joining us for that throughout the duration. Rounds 2 and 3 on Friday night. We'll flip it over to Anthony hosting from his disguised coverage brand, and Judge and I will be panelists on that. We'll have different things happening throughout the night. The Cover One Roundup guys will have you covered on Saturday starting at 12 p.m. And we also have personalities on site from Detroit who will be popping in to our live coverage throughout the evening, also doing some stuff on their own as well in Detroit. Tom DeLaus, John Helmkamp, and Joe DeRosa will all be boots on the ground in Detroit on Thursday. So we'll be looking forward to that and looking forward to them popping in and out of the coverage as well. So as we get into it tonight, I'll just kind of set the scene here a little bit for you all. And I really Judge, no matter what, I like this. Yes. The No Matter What list, for those of you who've been watching us for a couple years now, is really turns into a combination of it's not always the top end guys, right? And that's kind of how we've done our No Matter What lists in the past. It's usually a combination of some early round guys, some mid round guys, some late round guys, and really comes into really our preferences, guys who we think maybe could be good fits for the Bills, players we just like, prospects we like as good value, maybe where they're projected to be picked around. But at the end of the day, these are just generally our favorite prospects that we have at each position. And we're doing something a little bit different this year because we have so many prospects we like. And for those of you who've been with us throughout the pre-draft process, we have talked at length about a number of guys. And I know people have draft fatigue at this point, like mock draft fatigue. We all have a little bit of that fatigue. So hopefully this is a little bit more of a lighthearted show It's not going to be a super long show. I'm going to be sharing judges' videos and all that. But again, this is meant to be fun. It's a little bit to get away from some of the mock drafts. We got 3 days until the real draft. I know everyone's fatigued. We want to get this thing going. So Aaron Quinn pulling in a Dwight McLaughlin from Arkansas, no matter what. And we had and this kind of segues into something I want to talk about. Judge and I each picked a guy for our no matter what list at each position. We only could pick one guy. And that made it really hard for some of these positions where it's really deep. We did also include an honorable mention name for each position this year as well, which is something we hadn't done in the past. But because of the number of prospects we like in this class, we added a no matter what. I'll also be going through a couple of what I'll call close calls. If you watch college basketball, kind of like the first four out of the NCAA tournament, the teams that kind of maybe were on the bubble didn't get in. So I'll be going through a couple names, obviously, throughout the show of guys that we've talked about it on previous shows, but just didn't quite make the final cut. So let me get this overlay here situated and kind of make sure doing this solo tonight. I want to make sure I do this right for you all. So let me get this going over here. So we're going to start with defense tonight, and we're going to go position by position. We're not going to cover on offense. We're not going to cover quarterback. We're not going to cover tight end. I think that goes without saying. We haven't really been focused on those positions a lot in our pre-draft coverage. So we're going to focus on the positions that we've really gotten into throughout the course of the last several weeks. So Bills are electric. That's a really good question. Love to know what your matter what's were last year. And you know what? I was actually looking at that. I can bring that up here in a little bit. That is a really good question because I wanted to go back and see sort of how did I do last year on this, right? And so I'll give you a little flavor of who was on my no matter what list last year for the audience, and you can check these receipts; they're online. But here's a flavor of who was on my no matter what list last year. At running back, I had Keaton Mitchell from ECU. Had a pretty nice solid season with the Ravens there before he got hurt. At wide receiver, I had Josh Downs, a favorite of a lot of folks in the pre-draft process. Had a pretty good year for the Colts as a rookie. Tight end, Sam Laporta for me on my list last year. So another good hit there. Center, Ricky Stromberg, who's kind of feeling his way out still with the Washington Commanders. At guard, I had Nick Broker, who was drafted by the Bills and ultimately did not end up sticking, got poached. At offensive tackle, I had Wanya Morris, who ended up starting a lot of games for the Chiefs this year. At edge, I had Isaiah McGuire. Hasn't done much yet. On defense, I really didn't have some good picks here. Cameron Young on the interior, Yasir Abdullah at linebacker, Darrell Luter Jr. at corner, and Jordan Battle at safety were some of my names. So some pretty good names on there. And but let's get into tonight's names. And we're going to start with cornerback. Cornerback reveal here. We've got Judge picking arguably the best cornerback in the draft and Terrion Arnold. I'm going with Cooper DeJean. Look, Cooper DeJean's pro day kind of sold me on him as a player. The film room studies that Eric and Ant have been doing on DeJean just feels like he would be a spectacular fit in the Bills system. Is he going to play corner? Is he going to play safety at the next level? Primarily played outside corner. At Iowa, obviously had the 7 interceptions over his last 2 seasons, including 3 house calls. On the 3 of those interceptions can bring you value as a punt returner as well. And look, at the end of the day, whether you think Cooper DeJean is going to play corner or maybe transition to safety at the next level, it doesn't really matter to me. I think he's a guy you just want to get in your building. You look at the Bills roster right now, and you have Rasul Douglas, who they haven't extended yet, is here for 1 more year. You've got Mike Edwards, who is signed for 1 year at the safety position. So you have some uncertainty beyond 2024 at both corner and safety if you're the Bills. And why would you not be tempted to bring in a guy like Cooper DeJean, who's just been a just a solid player throughout his tenure at Iowa and always is around the ball, a heady player, and a guy, as as Aaron Quinn says in the comments, would be a McDermott wet dream. And Tim McLaughlin says DeJean would be a weapon on defense. So that is why he is my no matter what pick at corner. Maybe I cheated a little because people think he's a safety, but you know what? He's a corner. He played corner in college, so I'm putting him on my corner list. And then we've got my honorable mention. I'll get to Judge's video here in a second on Terry and Arnold. Miles Harden, who played outside um, at Arkansas. Uh, obviously, uh, excuse me, at South Dakota. I don't know why I said Arkansas. I was thinking of Dwight McLaughlin from Aaron Quinn earlier, so I apologize for that. Uh, Played prominently on the outside, but I think he's going to end up sliding into the inside at the next level. Really like his footwork, really like his ability to tackle. He reminds me a lot of Taron Johnson, the way he plays stylistically, and I think the Bills really could use a backup slot corner. I think Miles Harden fits that bill, and I'm really a big fan of Miles Harden. So I've been talking a lot about the guys that I put on my list. Let's hear from Judge on what he thinks about Terry and Arnold.
My no matter what cornerback of the 2024 NFL draft is Terrion Arnold out of the University of Alabama. At 6'1", 189 with 31 plus inch arms and only a 4.5 40, he's sort of got average physical tools, but he is an explosive athlete. He is probably my favorite player in this entire draft class. He was a pro player playing college football. If you ever had a chance to watch his interviews, either at the combine or with various different media personalities, if you have a chance, go check out him mic'd up at the Alabama Pro Day, talking to all the younger guys for a head coach in Kellen DeBoer that he's not even associated with anymore. He was still back at Alabama. He was still being a leader. He was still helping younger guys there. Like, this guy's got great football character. He's got high IQ. He absolutely gets after it in the run game. He is a physical presence and a sure tackler at the line of scrimmage. He is a sticky cover corner, can play inside, can play outside. He needs some minor tweaks to his technique, but he's got everything you want in a boundary number one cornerback. He's got tremendous ball production, 5 interceptions and 13 pass breakups in 2023. If he's there at 28, despite a perceived lack of need by a lot of people in Bills Mafia, he's likely going to be the best player on the board that the Buffalo Bills could select. That is why Terrion Arnold is my 2024, no matter what, cornerback.
Yeah, and poor Judge can't defend himself from Roy here having a bad hair day. And look, I will say this to everyone too. I have not watched these videos that Judge put in here until just now because I wanted to go in fresh. I wanted to have maybe some reaction to his videos. And I agree with what he says. DeJean, Arnold, if either one of them are on the board at 28, it would be pretty tempting for the Bills to take one of those guys, even though there is a lack of a perceived need. All right. That's corner. I know Aaron Quinn's going to pour one out for Dwight McLaughlin. I am as well. He was one of my favorites. He was a close call on the list. There are a lot of corners like that, McLaughlin being one of them. So we will now move on to our next position, which will be edge rusher. At edge, Judge going with the guy he had in our Dane Brugler dueling mock draft, and I going with my selection as in the our Dane Brugler mock draft. Judge going with Brennan Jackson, myself going with Mo Kamara. Honorable mention, Marshawn Nealon. Look, Mo Kamara, I don't know what else more I can say about him. I've talked about him at length on this show. The production is insane at the collegiate level. Will that translate? A lot of people have been trying to poke holes in Mo Kamara's game because of maybe his lack of apparent size, but the dude has a lot in his repertoire. He has power, he has speed. He could be a guy that could really benefit from being under the wing of a Von Miller and hopefully seeing that production translate to the next level. The Bills really need an edge player that can rush the passer to complement AJ Epinesa and Gregory Rousseau as their lengthier sort of edge setting guys. Not saying that Rousseau and Epinesa can't get to the passer, because they obviously can, but they're definitely more of those cleanup type of guys as the pocket gets collapse. They kind of clean up on the edges there. I would really like to get a truer pass rusher to complement Epinesa and Rousseau, and I really like the thought of an edge room with Epinesa, Rousseau, Von Miller, and Mo Kamara to round it out. A guy that was uber productive, Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year in 2023. So let's hear from Judge and what he has to say about Brennan Jackson.
My 2024 My 2024 no matter what edge defender is Brennan Jackson out of Washington State University. 6'4", 264 pounds, 32 plus inch arms. He's got a high floor, likely lower ceiling than a lot of prospects. He's going to be a rotational piece in the NFL. But you can plug and play him in a rotation from week 1 of his rookie season. He has the frame to go from day one, to play in the pros from day one, and he has over 40 games of college experience. He's got the hottest motor of any edge in this draft class. It never stops. He is a high energy player. He already has shown that he has a high IQ in the run game, and he can set the edge. So he will be an early down player while he works on his biggest weakness, and that is his lack of a pass rush repertoire. But hey, he's got a guy like Von Miller here in Buffalo that he can learn from, and he can grow and expand his game. But he is a plug and play, day one, early down, rotational defensive end. That is why Brennan Jackson is my no matter what 2024 edge rusher.
Love Brennan Jackson. I'm glad I could turn Judge on to him throughout this process. He was an early player that I was interested in, so I'm glad to see that he made Judge's list as his no matter what edge. Marshawn Nealon, I said it several weeks ago. I think he's going to be a round 2 pick. I think that he's got the size that you look for in a true edge setter. And look, if he can get into the right system and really get let loose, we know the athletic abilities there. Absolute freak of an athlete, testing over almost a 10.0 RAS. He was in the high 9s RAS wise. For a guy his size is really impressive. So rounding out this edge conversation, there were some close calls. Obviously, I think guys like Leti Latu who have those injury concerns. Is he going to make it at 28? We don't know. Would it be impossible to pass him up at 28? Maybe so. Other guys as well. But these were the guys that ultimately made our list. Moving on. Now we're going to get to safety, and it should be no surprise that Judge's no matter what safety, Adrian Taylor Demerson, he's been talking him up throughout the entire process, much like I've been talking about Javon Bullard throughout this entire process. Safety was a really tough one. And as you can see from our honorable mentions, we really just couldn't even pick one. You got Jalen Simpson, you got Malik Mustafa, you got Anthony, you've got so many good names. Tyke Smith, who has obviously the history with Jamil Adai, who's the Bills cornerbacks coach now. So many options here at safety. Javon Bullard has kind of been my guy. I do like Jaden Hicks as well. Ron says in the comment section, and Demerson. I do like that. I do like Jaden Hicks as well. Didn't quite make the list. Oladapo, we know that John Helmkamp's a big fan of Kitano Oladapo, and the history is an Oregon guy. So a lot of really interesting safeties. I like what Pat's saying here. Malik Mustafa will be my, no matter what, safety, maybe the best tackling player altogether in the draft. That's been a pretty, a pretty widely said statement about him. And for me, Javon Bullard, again, the ability to play down in the box, the ability to play out, maybe to also back up in the slot. Him and Tyke Smith were essentially interchangeable on that Georgia defense. So Claude Puig, it's breaking my heart. Kenny Logan late. He was what I'm going to call our close call list. He didn't quite make it, but Kenny Logan Jr. from Kansas is the Air Raid Hour is a fan of his. We like him. We know Aaron Quinn likes him. Athletically, he's limited. Basically played 50% each deep and in the box last year at Kansas. So he can actually play and has a little bit of versatility. He also helps in the return game as well, but didn't quite make the list. Let's hear what Judge had to say about maybe his number one player, although he did say Terry Arnold was his number one player, but one of his favorite players in the draft, Dadrian Taylor-Demerson.
My 2024, no matter what, safety in this year's draft class is Dadrian Taylor-Demerson out of Texas Tech University. At 5'10", 197, he's got 31-inch arms, 8.91 RAS. So this is a pretty good athlete despite his smaller size. He is versatile. He can center field. He can play nickel. He can play at the line of scrimmage. He can do it all, and he can do it all well. Over 1,000 career snaps at safety, 600 plus in college in the slot. He had 4 interceptions this past season, and he is an excellent blitzer on top of all of that. People were raving about his leadership at the Shrine Bowl. He was vocal pre-snap. He was lining guys up. He was calling out coverages, all the things you want to see a safety do, all the things Sean McDermott relied upon from guys like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. At the Shrine Bowl, zebra testing showed that DTD, who also likes to be called Rabbit, was the most traveled player on day one of the Shrine Bowl practices, going, and get this is an astronomical number for one day of practice, 4,804 yards. And he also had the most explosive efforts of any player tested that day. He is a rangy, instinctive defensive back. He's a tackling machine who plays bigger than his frame. My comp for him, Jordan Poyer. But other people have even gone as far to note similarities in DTD's game with the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. That is why Dadrian Taylor-Demerson is my no matter what safety in the 2024 NFL draft class.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons to like DTD. Number one, obviously the things Judge mentioned. Number two, same initials as me, DT. Number three, the dude is just all around the ball at all times, and it's an interesting prospect because I think the content creator community and the draft kind of Twitter and social media community maybe like DTD a little bit more than what we've heard reported from some of the beat reporters across the league around how NFL GMs might view him, but he's going to be a very interesting player to see where he actually ends up going on draft day. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he went on day 2. It also wouldn't surprise me if he ended up leaking into day 3. I would also be remiss not to mention Cam Kinchins, who was mentioned in the comment section. Obviously didn't test well at the combine, but the tape is there for him as a center fielder. Always knows where to be, instinctual. The film on him, Anthony Prohaska has done a great job in breaking down Kinchin's film. It's there, right? And as you saw in that little bit of a preview clip from Bills Embedded, Brandon Bean making the comment that they weren't going to knock guys too much if it was on film and they couldn't get it going in the testing department at things like the combine. Tyler Newman obviously is an option that a lot of people like as well as a center fielder, but I have to also mention Trey Taylor from Air Force. He's one of my favorite players. He's the Jim Thorpe Award winner from 2023. That's the best defensive back in the nation. His story is incredible. He's got a good interview on the Draft Network. If you go and read that, you'll fall in love with a guy like Trey Taylor. So many good safeties in this class. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and talk about every single one. That's not the point of this show tonight. But those are our lists. Now, rounding out the defense, let's get to the interior defensive line and some interesting names here. Judge going with Gabe Hall from Baylor. Obviously, you can't discount the Dave Aranda connection there with Baylor. The Bills have obviously gone to the well there in the past, and getting a guy like Terrell Bernard on the team. I myself am going with Johnny Jerzon Newton. He's had an interesting ride during this draft process, at least from like the draft community on Twitter and social media. He didn't test, obviously, at the combine, then tested afterwards, really performed well. In some mocks, like earlier in the process, he's going maybe even in the top 10 in some. Now I've seen some reports of him maybe drifting down past 28 or at 28 range. To me, it would be tough to pass on Johnny Newton. If he's available on the board, it would probably mean that a lot of wide receivers got picked, maybe ahead of the Bills, maybe even guys like, I would expect Brian Thomas would be off the board. I would expect maybe even other guys like Adonai Mitchell and even other guys like Troy Franklin or others to be off the board. Potentially, right? I'm just saying if Johnny Newton's there at 28, it would be a very interesting call for the Bills. And Ron says, I love the kid from LSU. There's three of them. Obviously, Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, and Jordan Jefferson. One of them might appear on our list later on for a little bit of a special segment. But the honorable mention goes to Michael Hall Jr. Judge had him in his Dane Brugler draft that we did last week. And I'm a big fan of Michael Hall Jr. as well. So that's why he earns the Air Raid Hour honorable mention. Let's hear from Judge on what he has to say about Gabe Hall.
My 2024 interior defender, no matter what player, is Gabe Hall out of Baylor University. 6'6", 291 pounds. He's got 34-inch arms. He can play behind Ed Oliver at 3-tech, or he can even line up next to him as sort of a pseudo 1-tech. He played under Dave Aranda at Baylor, and Aranda obviously has a relationship with Sean McDermott. Their relationship has led to the Buffalo Bills drafting both Tre'Davious White and Terrell Bernard, two big hits for the Buffalo Bills. He is explosive off the snap. He collapses the pocket from the interior, both in the run game and in the pass game. He had a huge Senior Bowl week. He was absolutely dominating the one-on-ones. He showed off his physicality. He put a strain on the offensive line on rundowns. You want to win in the playoffs? You need interior disruptors. Hall can be that if developed and deployed correctly. That is why Gabe Hall is my interior defender, no matter what player of the 2024 draft class.
Good thoughts there from Judge. And obviously we had John Helmkamp reporting from the Senior Bowl practice and just raving about Gabe Hall. Obviously, I like what Steve Noble says here. Chris Jenkins at pick 60. He was a person who was really high on my board early on and kind of drifted down slightly when I got to my final rankings. I still think he ended up at around 5 or 6 in my final rankings. I'll have to check on that. And Byron Murphy, little behind the curtain chatter here for between me and Judge. Judge had Byron Murphy originally on his no matter what list and switched it out for Gabe Hall. So we obviously big fans of Byron Murphy on this show. And he would have been our close call guy had we not, probably had we not gone with Gabe Hall, Judge would have had Byron Murphy, and we just had to put Michael Hall on just because of the consensus we have on him. And as Charles says, Michael Hall is super young too. Claude says Newton or Murphy at 28. Yep, my realistic guy is Chris Jenkins. Christian Boyd, another name that Bills fans should keep an eye on, was in on a 30 visit. Small school guy, obviously, but tested absolutely incredibly well. Athletic freak, could give you a little bit of inside-outside flex, and is a guy that certainly we should keep our eyes on. Braden Fisk is another one. And, the more you talk about this interior defensive line class, the more I actually think it's quite a deep class. And there are a lot of good options for the Bills at varying point. There will be a lot of good options for the Bills at varying points in this draft. Bills fan 7883 says Mason Smith is probably a top 15-20 pick if he doesn't get hurt. Could be the steal of the draft. We had that same kind of conversation about Andrew Voorhees a couple years ago. He slipped all the way down in the 6th, 7th round a couple years ago because of that quote redshirt year. But yeah, this DT class is deep. Dwayne Carter, another really, really intriguing prospect. I think he could go on day 2. Dwayne Carter from Duke, right down the road from me. He was a close call on this list as well. Just didn't quite make the cut. But there are a lot of guys, as you can see. We had Jason also saying Dwayne Carter no matter what. I love that pick. We are big Dwayne Carter fans here. Eric Turner has done some really good film cut-ups of Dwayne Carter. If you want to go check that out on Twitter or X, search for Dwayne Carter on X and you'll find Eric Turner's cut-ups of him. Jordan Jefferson from LSU. Keep that in mind for later. And there are just many guys, but these are the lists we've got. And as we now shift over to the offense, we'll start with running back just because, I think a lot of Bills fans, maybe don't necessarily see the need for running back as a super high priority. But again, with as many picks as the Bills have, getting someone in the room to complement James Cook, it is a need, right? I mean, we saw the Bills try to mix and match last year. They had Latavius Murray at points in time. They had Ty Johnson at points in time. A lot of interesting names at running back. Sword Brother mentions Ray Davis. We know how much Judge likes Ray Davis. Judge was kind of lurking in the weeds here with Audric Estime, who was on my top 5 running back list show that we did a couple weeks back. Judge coming in and putting Audric Estime on his no matter what list for his running back, passing on guys like Isaac Garendo, who he really liked, passing on Frank Gore Jr., who he really liked. Other guys are really intriguing in this class. Judge is a big fan of Blake Watson, didn't quite make our list either. Tyrone Tracy is an intriguing name. I went with Kamani Vidal. For those of you who have been following me for a while and following the pre-draft process on the Air Raid Hour, I've really been on Vidal since around the Senior Bowl, and just his stats are incredible. Obviously, the yards after contact, obviously small school, but the yards after contact means something there when you're at that level of competition and you can get that done. The pass protection from him is of the best in this class, if not one of the best. The question I had about Kamani was how would he test athletically, and he tested better than I would have hoped for. Ran a pretty good 40 time, ended up with a really nice RAS score there. And Vidal, to me, people have compared him to Fred Jackson. I see him more like a Devin Singletary. He's short. He is only 5'7", same height as Devin Singletary, but he has power. He can slip through. He can turn on a little bit of the jets. He ran in the 4.4s at the combine, which was really good for him, I thought. And that pass protection, man, is really something else. Chosen NB says, I can see them liking Lloyd as well. Marshawn Lloyd. The question about Marshawn Lloyd will be his pass protection. He didn't get asked to do a lot of pass protection stuff at USC, but he does have some short area bursts, which I do like. And then our honorable mention, Jalen Wright, the home run hitter from Tennessee. The reason Jalen Wright makes so much sense is because of that offense he plays in Tennessee, that read option, running out of the shotgun a ton, which the Bills, we know they do. We saw it a ton from the Bills last year. Jalen Wright would be a really good fit into the Bills system, presuming Joe Brady keeps a lot of those same concepts and obviously has that home run threat, good pass protector. Also like some other guys, close calls were Kendall Milton from Georgia, Braylon Allen, who was on our top 5 running back, my top 5 running back list, and Blake Watson from Memphis, as Pat mentions. But let's hear what Judge has to say about Chris Kepner's favorite, Audric Estime.
My 2024 no matter what running back is Audric Estime out of the University of Notre Dame. At 5'11", 221 pounds, he is a violent runner. People will knock his 4.71 40 at the combine, which he did clean up at his pro day. But when he hits the open field, he gains plenty of steam to make house calls. He is the perfect power combination to James Cook in the Buffalo Bills backfield. He's got good vision, good contact balance, and arm tackles will not bring this guy down. He always falls forward, picking up those extra yards. He is a solid pass protector. You will want this dude on your team if you are trying to close out games late in the fourth quarter with a lead.
And there you hear from Judge on Audric Estime. Nate Geary and Chris Kepner would be big fans of that move. I still want to reemphasize Kendall Milton as a priority free agent. Could be a really nice option for the Bills. An excellent pass protector, and obviously split that backfield time in Georgia. 14 touchdowns for him last year. Not going to go to wide receiver yet. I'm going to save that for the end. So we are going to go to interior offensive line next. Judge going with Brandon Coleman, who played tackle at TCU, but Judge believing that he will slide inside at the next level. And as I picked Graham Barton, who primarily played left tackle at Duke, but did play 5 games at center in this past season as injuries forced the Blue Devils to switch some things around on their offensive line, forcing Graham Barton in to play center. A lot of people believe Graham Barton could play all 3 to 5 positions on this on the offensive line, meaning tackle, guard, and center on either side. But I do like the fact that he is already being viewed as one of the shortest prospects and one of the steadiest, performers in this draft. Obviously, archetype size wise, yes, he played tackle at Duke, but the short arms are probably going to have some questioning whether he moves inside at the next level. But listen to some of these comments from Lance Zierlein on NFL.com about Graham Barton. Possesses the bend, core strength, and technique of an NFL starter. Smooth climber with good adjustments to targets in space. Counters rush movements with well-postured mirror and sticky hands. The weaknesses, obviously, the arms are shorter than NFL standard for his position, but if you feel like he's going to end up playing in the interior, then that's not so much an issue. So to me, Graham Barton, great fit. And then obviously Mason McCormick, how could we not mention him? One of Judge's selections last week on our Dane Brugler draft. You have to mention Mason McCormick, one of the two offensive linemen that Judge picked from South Dakota State in his mock draft there. But this guy's 6'4", 309, 10-inch hands. He's got the shorter arms, which is why he's the guard. 81-inch wingspan. Tons of experience and toughness. Strength in the upper half obviously is there. And as we've said on this show, the comparison to him is Richie Incognito. The dude is an absolute finisher. So obviously you've got to like what you see with Mason McCormick on tape as a finisher. Christian Haynes is a close call. We know Eric Turner's a big fan of his from UConn. He might be available there sometime in that second round. Ron says Christian Haynes is a stud. We've got a couple Christian Haynes comments in the comments section. We've got Zach Frazier from Charles G, the center, and Tom Hardy saying smash that like button. I would appreciate that from all of you. If you like this show, smash the like button. If you don't like this show, smash it anyway, and I would really appreciate that. Let's hear what Judge has to say about Air Raid Hour favorite, Brandon Coleman.
My 2024, no matter what, interior offensive lineman is Brandon Coleman out of TCU. At 6'4", 313 pounds with 34+ inch arms, he meets the size and measurables you want in an interior offensive lineman. He is versatile with starts over his career at left tackle, left guard, and right tackle. And as we know, Aaron Kromer absolutely loves versatility in his offensive lineman. He is powerful. He's got a broad frame. There's tape with him in 2023, lined up at left tackle with Steve Avila, one of our favorites from last year's class, lined up at left guard. That was so much fun to watch the two of those guys go to work. All of his issues are technique based, but he was a team captain. He's got football character. He's got the frames and the tools that you need to be elite for the guard position. A lot for Aaron Kromer to work with, and he can clean up that kind of stuff. He could realistically start from day one at left guard for the Buffalo Bills and give the Bills one of the most powerful offensive lines in football. Good luck defending Josh Allen with two high shells when you have James Cook running the ball down your throat behind an offensive line of Deion Dawkins, Brandon Coleman, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, and Spencer Brown. Brandon Coleman, my 2024 interior offensive lineman, no matter what player.
Yeah, and I love what Judge said there. I mean, Brandon Coleman, obviously similar to Graham Barton, going to likely slide inside at the next level. Really like what Ron says here. Haynes and Torrance as the long-term guards would be elite. Haynes actually reminds me of a lot of Torrance last year. And we know Eric Turner is a big fan of Christian Haynes. So this interior offensive line class is quite good. And as we've said on the last few shows we've had, interior offensive line is getting paid as a premium position now in the NFL. Look at some of these contracts that have been handed out to guards. Robert Hunt from the Panthers. Obviously, the Dolphins were sad to lose him. We're not sad to see him leave the Dolphins. But, man, guards are getting paid, and investments are being made in the interior offensive line because I think teams are realizing how important and maybe combating a little bit the speed element that defenses have put on the field, undersized defensive players, maybe the trend going back to some more power style football. So interesting to see where the league might head in the next several years with that. Let's move to offensive tackle now. Judge going with Roger Rosengarten from Washington. I'm going with Caden Wallace from Penn State. Honorable mention, how could we not put Frank Crum on this list from Wyoming? Played left tackle in 2023, was right tackle in 2022 and 21 and 20, was a combine standout, tons of experience, the tenacity, the effort, can play both left tackle and right tackle. He had that heart condition. I'm going to botch this name, so I apologize. Pericarditis, which is like a swelling of tissue around the heart, but he saw 5 different cardiologists, sat out spring practices, eventually was clear to play, and had a really good 2023. My player, Caden Wallace, 6'4", 314, the 34-inch arms. To me, he is a tackle, a right tackle at the next level. I know some people think he may slide inside, but man, this guy loves to look for work. He's confident in himself. I've mentioned it before on the show. He's been on 30 visits with teams like the 49ers, so teams are certainly interested in him. Played almost exclusively at right tackle, so I'm interested in his potential future as a swing tackle maybe for this team, as a guy that can play multiple positions, as insurance for the future for whatever happens with Spencer Brown, but really a big fan of Caden Wallace's game. Patrick Paul from Houston, a lot of chatter around him lately, him getting talked about as being a potential day 1 pick. At this point, I mentioned him a couple shows ago about how he's just an absolute athletic freak, and certainly gained a lot of attention from that. You start to look at his measurables, right? 6'7", 333. He's got the 36-inch arms, 86-inch wingspan. I mean, he's an absolute athletic freak, 9.75 RAS, graded out as the second best pass blocker per PFF in 2023 for all O linemen with at least 200 snaps. So, yeah, Patrick Paul was one of our close calls on this list, but ultimately we went with Frank Crum, who he's just near and dear to our hearts. So that's why we went with him. But let's hear what Judge has to talk about with another fan favorite, Roger Rosengarten.
My no matter what offensive tackle for the 2024 NFL draft class might be a little bit of a surprise. It is Roger Rosengarten, the offensive tackle out of the University of Washington. At 6'5", 308 with 33-inch arms, he checks the physicality boxes. He's got 28 games at right tackle under his belt at the University of Washington, and that was protecting Michael Penix's blind side because Penix is obviously left-handed. If Rosengarten had transferred from UW to another program since they lost so many guys, or he had gone back to UW for another year, he might have been a top 15 pick in the 2025 NFL draft class. So if he is on the board at pick 60, that is immense value that the Buffalo Bills might not want to pass up, especially given Spencer Brown's contract expires at the end of the 2025 season. He's got plus length. He's got foot quickness. He's got range. He's really good at using his hands. He checks a lot of the boxes of what Aaron Kromer likes in an offensive lineman. Plus, he has a year behind Dawkins and Brown to work on probably what is his biggest weakness, and that's probably adding another 10 pounds of weight and adding a little bit of play strength to his frame so he can become more powerful. Roger Rosengarten, my no matter what offensive tackle of the 2024 class.
Yeah, and I like a lot of these names that the comment section is throwing out. Omega G from Yale, big fan. This tackle class is really good. It was really hard to kind of narrow this down. I'm a big fan of Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. I know some people have knocked like his height being a potential. He's too tall almost, but that dude's an athletic freak too and can play right tackle. I think he could be a swing tackle at the next level. I'm a really big fan of Tyler Guyton. It would not surprise me at all if Tyler Guyton was a first-round pick. And maybe even, a pick in the 20s, like early 20s at that stage. We mentioned Patrick Paul, obviously, a lot of good tackles. We didn't even really touch on any of the big names like Joe Alt or Amarius Mims, Troy Fontenot, but there are a lot of good tackles in this class. I'm a big fan of Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. I like his. Dominic Pooney, who I think a lot of people think could maybe slide inside as well. Javon Foster, who I think a lot of people think could slide inside as well. There are a lot of good names. You've got Brandon Coleman's teammate, Andrew Coker, as another tackle from TCU. So again, tough to narrow this list down. And Charles says, I think Guyton and Mims I think Mims for sure is a lock for round 1. I wasn't so sure about Guyton, but the more I think about it, the more I do think Guyton's going to be a round 1 pick. I'm a big fan of his. It came down to him or Wallace for me, and I ended up going with Wallace, but that was more so because I just don't think Tyler Guyton's going to be on the board when the Bills pick at 28. So I just kind of didn't go that way, and I went with Wallace instead. All right. We've got 2 segments left. We got our wide receiver, no matter what. And then we added a wild card, no matter what segment for this year, where you could pick any player from any position as a bonus player. But we'll go with wide receiver next. And we've got the Air Raid Hour consensus. First time tonight we've picked the same player. Now I will say I did see Judge's list ahead of time, but I had to go with Xavier Legette. Judge went with Xavier Legette. We're going with Javon Baker as our honorable mention here. Could not leave Javon Baker off the list after how much I've been talking about him throughout the pre-draft process. His average depth of target, his drops, I know, are a concern to some, but this guy has all the makings of a good X receiver at the next level, can play inside and out. But the X factor is Xavier Legette, and I think that Judge and I kind of both recognize that Xavier Legette could be the ceiling X receiver that the Bills realistically have a chance at getting, right? And so, look, I'm not gonna quibble with anyone if they have other names that they like more than Xavier Legette. If you're a Troy Franklin fan, I can understand why you would like Troy Franklin. If you're a Xavier Worthy fan, I can understand why you would like Xavier Worthy. And I'd be really happy with any of those guys. Adonai Mitchell has his fans as well. Obviously, you have now the medical concerns with him to go along with some of that effort. Do those two things relate to each other? I think is going to be the question. But I love a lot of those guys. I love a lot of the wide receivers in this class. Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin. There even Keon Coleman has some fans, and I think it was about maybe 2 weeks ago I predicted, I was like, I just have a gut feeling either Xavier Legette or Keon Coleman will be a Buffalo Bill. I don't know which one, but I just feel like one of those guys would be. Then you got obviously Brian Thomas Jr. What's going to happen with him come draft night? Is he going to start slipping? Is he going to get picked super early to where the Bills don't even have a chance at him? Lad McConkey has a big following from Bills Mafia as well. Roman Wilson, who was mentioned at the top of the show, has a big following. Ricky Pearsall has a big following. There are so many guys that I'm not going to really like. If you have another guy you like better, cool. Like, I like all these guys, right? So it doesn't even really matter to me who we end up with at this point. But if the Bills find a guy that they really like that fits what they want to do, then that's all that matters ultimately. So I know there's people that don't even like Xavier Legette, right? I know there's people that don't like Javon Baker because of his drops, but these are the guys we ended up with on the Air Raid Hour. So you know what? Because Judge and I both picked Xavier Legette, let's let him do the heavy lifting and talk about him.
My no matter what wide receiver for the 2024 class is Xavier Legette out of the University of South Carolina. At 6'1", 221 pounds, Legette checks almost every single box that the Buffalo Bills need. He has football character. He overcame a lot, and that played a role in his late career breakout. He has a boundary type body at that size. Plus, with his 4.39 speed, he's got the ability to stretch defenders vertically and open things up for guys underneath. He is an absolute yak monster, which is something that Joe Brady emphasizes in his new look Bills offense, or at least we think he's going to emphasize in this new look Bills offense. He can take it to the house from anywhere on the field. If he has a runway, it is 6 points for Xavier Legette. He is the best high pointer in this year's draft. He might be the best high point contested catch receiver that the draft has seen in the past 3 or 4 years. He's got a skill set that Josh Allen has really never had from his wide receivers, and he's got the body type to get after it in the run game. And with the new kickoff rules, he can be used on kick returns as well. He is a big play waiting to happen. He checks so many boxes for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, well said by Judge, and a lot of people mentioning Romo Dunes in the comment section. I just don't know that the Bills realistically have a shot to get him without having to fork over some heavy capital, right, in the terms of draft picks. So love O'Dunes. I think I agree with Chosen here that he would be a Bills guy. He seems like a great fit for what the Bills want to do. Love the other Washington wide receivers as well. Jalen Polk, he's another nice name. Jalen McMillan is a nice name. Roman Wilson. I like this duo that Charles mentions here, and Jalen Polk and Roman Wilson. There are a lot of good names, and I think you're starting to see some contingencies of fans that are okay if the Bills pass on wide receiver in round one. You're even starting to see some fans that are okay if the Bills pass on wide receiver in rounds 1 and 2. So the wide receiver class is deep. I think at the end of the day, you just have to see how the board shakes out, and we're only a couple of days away from finding that out. On to our last segment, our new one for this year, our wild card picks for no matter what. And these are just any other guy we wanted to pick. And typically the way Judge and I discussed this with these would be kind of like day 3 guys. We didn't want to necessarily pick like the top names. We just felt like that was going to be just a little too obvious. So we're going to go with some deep cuts here and pick basically the guys that we feel are going to be late day 3 guys. Judge going with Anthony Gould. Obviously, he's talked about him a lot in previous shows, had him in the Dane Brugler mock draft. I'll let Judge talk about him just a second. I'm going with Miles Harden. He's the guy that, for me, checks a lot of boxes as a slot guy at the next level. I know he was mentioned as an honorable mention earlier, but going with him as my wild card pick to get him specifically on the list. And I just feel like he would be the perfect type of backup to Taron Johnson. I love his ability to play zone. I love his ability to tackle and come down and get his hands dirty. To me, he checks a lot of boxes. And then for honorable mention, we're going Jordan Jefferson from LSU. Could have picked any of the LSU guys, but really like Jordan Jefferson's game. Really think he was the glue on that LSU defensive line. Can really play both 1-tech and 3-tech. He's been a guy we've been on for a long time now. A lot of good options here. And ultimately, we landed on Jordan Jefferson as our wild card player. Honorable mention. So let's hear what Judge has to say about Anthony Gould.
My no matter what wild card player of the 2024 NFL Draft is Anthony Gould, wide receiver / return specialist out of Oregon State University. Yes, he's small, 5'8", 174 pounds, 30-inch arms, but he is lightning fast. 4.39 40. He's got 93rd percentile in the 10-yard split, 89th percentile in the vert, 88th percentile in the broad, and 65th percentile in the shuttle. He has speed, but more importantly, he knows how to control his speed, when to accelerate, when to decelerate, all the things that good receivers with speed have. He worked primarily on the outside in college, and he got open at all 3 levels of the field, but he's most likely going to move inside in the pros. He could be legitimately this year's Tank Dell if used properly. Let me read you this excerpt from Lance Zierlein's scouting report on Anthony Gould. He has electrifying long speed and spent a majority of his reps as an outside receiver working all 3 levels of the field. He has the shiftiness to uncover against tight man coverage from the slot, but can be utilized as a matchup problem deep against cornerbacks lacking speed. That checks a lot of the boxes for what the Buffalo Bills are looking for. And on top of all of that, he was first team all Pac-12 return specialist. He can house a punt from anywhere on the field, and he did so this year in the Shrine Bowl. That is why Anthony Gould is my 2024, no matter what, wild card player.
2024 wildcard player. We got some good names coming up. Let me just hear from the comments section, just maybe some later round guys that you like as a no matter what. We got Bills fan 783 saying Leonard Taylor the third is that guy. He's going to be an absolute menace. Ron says Cornelius Johnson from Michigan. He's an interesting player we talked about on our wide receivers show. If you go back to our YouTube playlist on the Cover One channel, we did a whole show on wide receivers and tiering, and we talked a little bit about Cornelius Johnson. Judge comped him to Donovan Peoples-Jones. I like that comp. I think a lot of people will try to make him Nico Collins, but he is more Donovan's Peoples-Jones in my opinion as well. Charles says Kinchins still my guy. Love Kinchins. I do think Kinchins could present immense value for the Bills. Maybe a possible situation where if the Bills find themselves finagling their way back into the third round somehow, either through a trade down from early picks or a trade up from later picks, Kinchins could be in that sweet spot maybe in round 3. Could a guy like Kinchins fall all the way into round 4? That's one of those guys that I feel like when Bean talks about on that embedded preview, when he says, we're not going to knock the guys for the testing here if they have it on tape, Kinchins screams that to me from Brandon Bean. And we saw that with Gabe Davis several years ago. He mentioned that as much in the behind the scenes embedded as well. Brendan Rice is an interesting name that people talk about as well. Quantez Stiggers, yeah, Ron says, and I think that name was mentioned a couple times as well earlier in the comment sections. Nikki says Kinchins at 128 for the win. Man, that would be really pretty incredible. That pretty much wraps up the show for tonight. This was going to be a shorter one. We're putting in all the last minute work to try to get ready for our big live coverage show starting Thursday at 8 p.m. We'll be on with you guys starting at I'm just like losing there we go. Starting at 8 p.m. on Thursday, we will be bringing you the live coverage. Judge and I will be hosting. And I want to thank everyone really for being along with us on this journey. I know the season didn't end the way we wanted to. This, to me, has felt like a longer time in between the end of the season and the draft actually being here. I know people have draft fatigue. I've mentioned it at the beginning of the show. I'm not going to do any more mock drafts. I think at this point, it's just too much. I think we're ready for the real draft to be here. Maybe I shouldn't say I'm not going to do any more. I'm not going to publicize any more mock drafts. I only actually publicized 2 so far this year. So join us on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Or at 8 p.m. I keep saying 7. 7's the Friday show. Well, you know what? Why don't I just put up the graphic here? Make things easier for everyone. Round 1 coverage, 8 p.m., Air Raid Hour hosting. Rounds 2 and 3, 7 p.m., Anthony Prohaska from Disguise Coverage hosting. Judge and I will be along as panelists that night. Rounds 4 through 7, 12 p.m., the Roundup guys will be hosting, and different personalities from Cover 1 will be coming in and out of that coverage. And then you've got your on-site draft coverage with Tom DeLoss, John Helmkamp, and Joe DeRosa credentialed for the draft in Detroit. They will be popping in and out with us throughout the draft. And we've got a couple new added production enhancements for you all, starting with something like this. So you'll see stuff like that showing up on the draft coverage, different animations, different things to help our production quality, trying to make it the best show possible for you guys. You deserve it. You've been following along with us throughout the entire process, and we really look forward to seeing you all Thursday at 8 p.m. And until next time, go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!